Main Power Up, also known as MPU, was a stackable gear ability introduced in Splatoon 2. But due to how controversial it was, it didn't make a return for Splatoon 3. At least, not yet. I say not yet because there are a few things I've seen within the game, as well as data mines, that make me wonder, will MPU actually come back in a later update? As always, if you enjoy the video, consider hitting the like button and subscribing. It's just a couple clicks from you guys, and it helps me out a ton. What I want to do first is give you guys a brief little history of Main Power Up, and why it was so controversial in the previous game. If you're a Splatoon 2 veteran and you already know all the ins and outs of Main Power Up, go to this timestamp, as that's where I'll start talking about why the ability might make a return. But as for the rest of you who don't, Main Power Up was an ability that would boost a certain aspect of your main weapon. Its effect would vary depending on which one you were using. For example, a lot of shooter weapons would get increased accuracy while jumping. Others would get increased painting. Many splatlings would get an increased duration of fire after releasing a charge. The tent umbrella would have increased durability to its shield. The list goes on, and some weapons had really cool and unique effects when having MPU equipped. However, I say some weapons because, unfortunately, a good half of the weapons in the game had a more lazy MPU effect. And what might that be, you ask? Damage up. Yes, I'm serious. A good half of the weapons in the game would simply just get increased damage. On paper, damage up doesn't necessarily seem bad, but it got significantly worse when you looked at specific weapons. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of it in this video, but all you really need to know is that MPU damage up allowed certain weapons to kill people with one shot less than it would normally take. For example, the dually squelchers could kill people in 3 shots instead of 4. The Splattershot Pro could kill people in 2 shots instead of 3. And perhaps the worst culprit was the Bamboozler, which could kill in 1 shot instead of 2. If your enemy just slightly dipped their foot into your team's ink, you could pretty much always kill them with 1 less shot if you were running the correct amount of main power up. If you're curious as to why this worked the way it did, or you want to know more specifics, check out this video I made back in the day. It explains everything. But as you can imagine, this whole MPU damage up fiasco wasn't super healthy for Splatoon 2's meta. It made certain weapons such as the dually squelchers, L3 nozzle nose, Splattershot Pro, and Bamboozler absolutely busted. But more importantly, it rendered certain other weapons in the game absolutely useless. I got hit with this MPU fiasco the hardest, because dualies were probably the weapon class that suffered from damage up the most. Again, I talk about why that's the case in the video I just mentioned. But the most annoying part about all of this was just that Nintendo would not nerf it. The only thing they'd do with some of these broken MPU damage up weapons was just make it so that it required a little more MPU in your build to reach the early kill potential. It was complained about so much, so the reason why Nintendo never decided to fix MPU damage up in that game will always be a mystery. But here's the good news. Main Power Up is gone in Splatoon 3. The ability is no longer a thing. You could make the argument that it sort of still exists with Intensify Action, since this ability gives every weapon increased jump accuracy, as MPU would do for certain weapons in Splatoon 2. That's it though, every other benefit it had is nowhere to be seen. Well, for now at least. This leads me into the main topic of the video, which is that I have a theory that Main Power Up might make a return to the game at some point. But don't worry, because if it does, I'm pretty certain that it'll be better. Let me explain. So here's the first thing that really got me thinking about MPU potentially returning. When the chill season came out about a month ago, the files for all the new weapons were data mined. And under the files for the Big Swig Roller, Lean Yoshi found something kind of interesting. Alongside all the things you'd normally expect, there's apparently code for a main power-up effect. For the Big Swig Roller, it apparently boosts its range. So this could be taken a variety of different ways. The first way most of us in the competitive community reacted was with panic. We do not need a repeat of the MPU fiasco from Splatoon 2 in this game. But there's also the possibility that this doesn't mean anything. Some other people pointed out that there was already code for main power-up in the game since launch, and nothing was ever done with it. Maybe main power-up was originally planned for Splatoon 3, but the devs ended up scrapping it last second. Or they're saving it to be added in later, which is the theory I'm kind of leaning towards right now. While there's no hard evidence or clues that support this theory, there are a couple odd things that I've noticed in-game. Like, doesn't it seem kinda weird that there's just one spot missing on the ability page here? Like they could just easily add one in or something? And also, I find it strange that some of the gear brands have duplicate favorite abilities. Take Tony Kensa and Anaki for example. In Splatoon 2, these brands were likely to roll main power-up. But in Splatoon 3, since MPU doesn't exist, they just stuck Inksaver main and Inksaver sub on them, when there were already other brands like Splash Mob and Firefin which already favor those abilities. Again, there's nothing wrong with any of this, the devs are allowed to make these changes, but it just feels a little suspicious. It all just feels a little makeshift to me. The last thing I want to talk about is, what would MPU be like if it returned? Would we get the same horrific meta that Splatoon 2 had? Well, look, I'm not the Splatoon devs, and I don't know how they think, but all I'm gonna say is, if they have any brain cells whatsoever, they won't bring back damage up. Even if they refuse to make changes to it in Splatoon 2, they had to have seen all the complaints about it from the competitive community. So here's my theory. Main power-up will come back to Splatoon 3 at some point, but damage up won't be a thing. Instead, every weapon will have its own unique trait, making the ability appear more fun and creative overall. In Splatoon 2, most people liked main power-up and thought it was a cool ability, they just didn't like the damage up part of it. So if it were to return in Splatoon 3 without that, I think people would generally be pleased. But all I'm saying is, they better not bring damage up back, because I want to be able to use my dualies in peace.